Okay, so I'm going to start a two-part video series on going through the Yamamoto fountain pen friendly paper collection sampler packs. I recently ordered this from Vanness, and I ordered volume 1 and volume 2. So I'm going to do it as two separate videos because this is going to be it's going to take a little bit of time to get through this. So what this is Yamamoto released sampler packs of 5 different papers. And as you can see here, it's got a description of what the paper is, and then it has 5 sheets of the paper. And then it's going to have a description of the next paper, go through it. So this will be a way to see the different characteristics of the paper with different pens and inks, and then see how they write, see how they respond. And they do this so that you have an option to try it before you buy, essentially. So this will be a little bit more involved video. So what I'm going to do is do most of the writing off camera and then look at the results after the fact. So we'll be going through the number 1, which is called Thin Paper, which is a 52 GSM by Kikuyo. Number 2 is Sansen Tomoe River, 52 GSM. Number 3 is a 35 GSM Champion Copy. Number 4 is a 27.9 GSM typewriter paper. And then number 5 is Smooth Onion Skin, supports alcohol inks and it's a 40 GSM. Now, if you saw the paper sampler I did that Gentleman Stationer released around Fountain Pen Day, that one did have onion skin, and that was a neat paper to write on, so that'll be interesting to have some more sheets to play around with here. But, I'm very excited for this. I've seen these around, so let's get all this stuff going and let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the pens and nib sizes that I use for this test. Starting at the top here, we have a TWSBI 580 with an extra fine nib, and the ink in this is the Colorverse Pulsar Pulse from the calendar this last year. The next one is a Bach fine nib in the pens by Pasquale Merlin. And the ink in this is the Robert Oster Blue River, which was made for Vanness. Next, we have a couple of loaner pens from my wife to get some more nib size variation. A TWSBI Eco, and the ink in this is a medium nib, and the ink is the Iroshizuku Kosumosu. Next, we have another borrowed pen in my wife's TWSBI 580. This has a broad nib, and this ink is Pelikan Edelstein Onyx. We have the Lamy 2000 extra fine nib, the stainless version. The ink in this is a Iroshizuku Shinkai. We have my Opus 88 Omar. The ink in this is the Teranishi Guitar Gentle Green, and this is an extra fine nib. And then last, we have the Asveen J16, which has a Yovo extra fine nib in it. And the ink in here is the Iroshizuku Saiyan Gyo. And then what I did for an ink swatching is I used the Teranishi Guitar Gentle Green, because this is the ink that I've noticed in a past video and just in paper testing, like on Irreful, this will not change colors. When you put this ink down, it starts as a nice bluish teal, and then as it dries, it ends up as a green with a little bit of sheen on it. So I wanted to see if any of these papers prevented that color change from happening like Irreful does. So that's what I used, and I just used a simple glass dip rod like you've seen on the channel before for ink swatching. The other things is I put all the papers on the included from Yamamoto kind of testing card. I didn't do the grid side, I just did the normal line side to keep them lined up. And I used blotting paper to keep my hand from getting any oils on the page as I was writing, just to try and make it as accurate as I could of a test. So let's take a look at the first paper, and I'll go through each one and show the writing, and then I'll put all 5 of them out at the end as a side-by-side comparison. Okay, so starting with paper number 1, this is the Thin Paper by Kikuyo, which is the 52 GSM. I'm not going to read this entire paragraph. I'm going to give a couple of highlights. This paper was originally developed by Kikuyo for use in their planner products. So this is commonly used in the Jiben Techno Regular, the Jiben Techno Light series, the Jiben Techno Days, and the Jiben Techno Ideas. So this was developed originally, it says, by their advertising creator, Hideaki Sakuma. And it's great for low viscosity inks, such as J.R. Bond's pink and red inks, and it shows very fast drying times and no bleed through even when you put down overlapping lines of ink. Alcohol markers and oil-based pens do show some see-through, but it doesn't bleed all the way through. So let's get to writing on paper number 1, Thin Paper by Kikuyo. Okay, so starting with paper number 1, this is the 52 GSM thin paper, and I would call this an expected result by far. You can see that each size of nib kind of steps up in the expected, line variation, from extra fine all the way up through broad. And then switching over to some of the German nibs, you see the same effects there. From a swatching standpoint with the Teranishi Gentle Green, it was able to change colors and, showed the, where it's thicker ink, it dries. In terms of the back of the paper, I would say this you could easily use for dual-sided writing if you wanted. So overall, paper number 1, the Thin Paper 52 GSM, was a nice writing paper and kind of a standard swatch, if you will. So let's move on to number 2. Okay, so paper number 2 is probably one of the more controversial papers. This is the Sansen Tomoe River S. The brief summary here is Tomoe River Company stopped producing in 2021, so the formula to keep Tomoe paper going was sold to Sansen. This is 5-micron thicker paper. It was, it says in here, fountain pen tests conducted by Yamamoto Paper showed even with low viscosity ink such as JR Bonds, pinks, and reds, the dry time was quick and the ink did not bleed through even when large amounts of ink were put on the paper. Now this is what I had in my Hobonichi Weeks, and I saw the complete opposite results. So let's get to the writing for number 2, Sansen Tomoe River S. Okay, so number 2 in the sampler is the Sansen Tomoe River S, and it's also the 52 GSM, and you can see this is a very similar result. The nibs step up gracefully from extra fine up through broad. The German nibs, you can see the variation as well. Well, all three of these are extra fine, but like the Lamy 2000 extra fine normally is a thicker line than like a Yovo extra fine. The Gentle Green was able to do its color change. You can see the sheen coming through and in the swatch, and you can see a little bit of the teal as it lightened up where it was less ink and it didn't have as much of a color change. In terms of the back of the paper, this would very easily be usable, in this manner for both sides of the paper writing. Now, I will say this was a very different result. I'm kind of surprised at this one from the Sansen Tomoe River that I have in my Hobonichi Weeks. But overall, I'm pleased with this. If this was how the Weeks paper was working, I wouldn't have moved from the Weeks to a different system. But that's for a different video. So overall, 52 GSM Sansen Tomoe River S, a nice writing experience. Let's look at number 3. Okay, paper number 3 is Champion Copy, and this is by Mitsubishi Paper Mills Limited. This is the 35 GSM paper, and this says this was a need for a very thin but durable high see-through paper that was used for letterpress and offset printing. Fountain pen tests show fast dry times, good color reproduction, and no bleed-through, and it's using the old equipment from the Takasago factory in Hyogo Prefecture. Now, one thing I'm just going to show on this before we get to the writing, I put the card that came with the sampler pack underneath, and you can see how see-through this paper is. It's a very, very thin paper, and you can hear it. I don't know if the mic will pick that up well, but it's very thin, so it'll be interesting to see how this performs. So that is the number 3 Champion Copy. Okay, so paper number 3 is the 35 GSM Champion Copy. Now for these last 3, because they are thinner papers, I'm holding them over a sheet of blotter paper just because the ink, the way the camera picks it up, it almost wants to shoot through the paper because they're so thin. Overall, though, this was a very similar result. You get good color. You can even see a little bit of the sheening on the Pulsar Pulse ink here. It is a sheener from the Colorverse calendar. You can see the line variation walking through the nib sizes. The Gentle Green did get its color change, and it's a very similar result to the last one where it's thinner ink at the end. It's a little bit more bluish tone where it didn't do the color change. In terms of back writing, I would consider this a one side of the paper writing in the camera, I can see it shows it a little bit worse than it does in person because the way it picks up the filming. But, you could write on this if you were alternating your lines, but I think for most people, this would probably be a one side of the paper. If you're writing a letter where you would just move on to the next sheet. And you can really see on the swatch, and you kind of see it on all of them to some extent, when the ink swatch first goes down, there's a lot of yellows that come through on the back side of the paper that you don't see on the front that carry over. But, this was still a nice writing experience. I could see why this would have been used for letter writing to keep down on postage costs because it is thin, but it shows everything well. So that's number 3, the Champion Copy, 35 GSM. Let's move on to number 4. Okay, paper number 4 is Typewriter Paper by Mitsubishi Paper Mills Limited. This is the 27.9 GSM. Now, the typewriter paper, it says in the paragraph here that this was designed to be able to put 5 sheets of typewriter paper with carbon layers in between it. And when the key on the typewriter would strike, you'd get clean impressions through 5 sheets of paper. It also says that this is on the same old equipment from Takasago Factory in Hyogo Prefecture, and that it would be hard to reproduce the quality of this type of paper with modern mass production equipment. Fountain pen tests showed short dry times, good color representation, and no bleed through. So let's get on to the writing of number 4, Typewriter Paper. Okay, so number 4, this is the thinnest of all the papers. This is the typewriter paper, and if you remember on the intro, this is meant to be able to put 5 sheets of this with carbon between them and type, and have all 5 copies have a clean imprint. So incredibly thin, you can hear. Hopefully the mic picks that up. But in terms of writing on it and color, response and everything, you can see the sheen on the Colorverse Pulsar Pulse. All the rest of the inks, you can see the size step up through the nibs. The swatch went down nice and clean. You can see the variation. And then in terms of the back of the paper, because it's so thin, this is really a one side for writing. I think for almost anybody. Now, there might be some people who would still want to try and use this for dual-sided writing. I just don't think it would be that practical. And you do see, once again, the yellow on the back side of the paper from the swatch that kind of carries through, which I think is a little bit neat, where the yellow shades to the bottom of the paper but doesn't show up on the top. But from a writing standpoint, this is definitely a nice and fun paper to write on. It is thin, but I'm sure there's, unique uses for this if you're not using it on a typewriter. But that was number 4, the 27.9 GSM typewriter paper. And one more to go. Let's move on to number 5. Okay, and on to the last one from Volume 1 of the sampler. And on to number 5, which is the Smooth Onion Skin Supports Alcohol Inks, which is the 40 GSM paper. This is incredibly lightweight and translucent. It got its name because it does resemble the outer skins of an onion. Says this has most onion skin paper is a different type of finish due to natural drying, but Yamamoto uses a wheel dry machine, so it makes it extra smooth. This is well suited for fountain pens. In spite of the thinness, the paper has high color ability without bleeding, even with low viscosity fountain pen inks. And there's no back thinning, even when the ink is applied over the surface with alcohol markers or oil-based pens. So this is number 5, Smooth Onion Skin Supports Alcohol Inks by Yamamoto. Okay, so number 5 is the onion skin paper. Now this is the one that I had used before when Gentleman Stationer did a paper sampler around the Pelican Hub of this last year. Now what I noticed on this is, let me get to the side camera here because you can really see it a little bit better. This paper seems to size down every nib by about a size. Let me see if I can just grab one of these others here to show us side by side specifically for this, what I mean. If you look at like the word Twisby on the third one down, you can really see how much thinner the onion skin shows versus the other. The line below that too with the 580 with the broad nib, you can see how much thinner it looks on the onion skin paper. So just something to keep in mind if you're using this. I know this was in the, if it was the Cosmo Airmail paper that they used this. Other than that, color shows through great. The swatch came through and did its color change. You can see the shading in the swatch. You can see the shading in the Pulsar Pulse ink. In terms of dual-sided writing, this is actually where, of the 3 thin papers, I think you could more easily get around using both sides of the paper on this, depending on nib and ink choice. But, overall, this is a fun paper to write with. I kind of knew what I was going to be getting into with this one since I had used this one once before, but very pleasing, for a 40 GSM to get the color showing properties, and if you were mailing this, it's going to stay nice and light. So that's number 5, the Smooth Onion from the Yamamoto Paper Pack. Okay, so here we have all 5 papers lined up, and just notice I had these 2 out of order. So this is number 1 on the left, the thin paper. Number 2, the Sansen Tomoe River. Number 3, the Champion Copy. Number 4, the Typewriter paper. And number 5, the Onion Skin. So when looking at them side by side, and because some of these are so thin, I'm trying my best not to overlap them, any more than is necessary to have them all in the camera view. But you can really see, consistency. And like I said, if we compare like number 1 to number 5, let's say, in terms of, let me see, what's the best way to hold these to show that line variation. If you look at the top line there, you can see that the onion skin is definitely thinner on each of these. The Pins by Pasquale, the word pins really shows it. And then on the third one down, Twisby, on that pink Iroshizuku ink, really shows that line variation size. The rest of them, I would say, are all pretty even. Between the other 4, I think the pins all wrote very similarly. Like I said in the individual papers, the onion skin is the only one that I really saw any kind of variation. So all of these behaved well. I didn't see any feathering. And, just to show the back side of each of these, you can see the yellow through. The Sansen and the thin paper could be used for both sides. All 3 of these, at least for me, would be a single side of paper use. And the camera does make it show through a little bit worse on these thin papers, especially on this number 3. It shows through a lot more on the camera than it does in person. But, overall, this has been an interesting look at these 5 papers from Yamamoto in this Volume 1 of the Sampler Pack. And, be sure you're following the channel and go and click on that subscribe button so you can see when I do Volume 2, I'm going to do a very similar test. And then at the end of that video, I'll be able to hold all of the samples from the Yamamoto together in one to get a accurate comparison with the same pen, same inks, and same exact testing methodology. So, for now, I think that's going to cover this Volume 1. And let me just bring the cover in here so you can see it, this was from Vanness. And don't forget, you can use code DWRDNET and get 10% off your purchases at Vanness. There are some exclusions, so check that out on their website. It's listed on each item whether or not discount codes can apply. But I'm very grateful to Vanness for offering that up for viewers to be able to save a little bit when ordering from them. So I'm going to leave that there for today. And like I said, be sure and come back for Volume 2 as I work through the next set of papers from Yamamoto. And thanks for watching.